Our team recently sat down with Chris Potestio, a former buyer for Texas-based grocer HEB Central Market. Now a consultant, Chris helps rising brands develop their go-to market strategy. We started by asking Chris to share a little bit about himself and his history in the retail buyer space.
Adult beverage and grocery and CPG. Those three combined is really where my experience has been over kind of the last 15 years. Joining HEB Central Market stores, which is a gold banner in my opinion, is being an operator within the grocery. The company is now, well over 105 plus years old with about 350 stores, and they just really are buttoned up and know how to partner with conventional and rising brands, and are very innovative of looking for the next best thing.
Which retail trends are affecting rising brands most?
As far as trends coming on, I really see it being about a company that is nimble, innovative, and really not doing what a lot of the conventional brands are and historically have been. That maybe goes against the category space they play in. A lot of these companies really want to get into standing out because that's important as a new brand and as your rising brand, that you want to be able to say, well, this is why you got to take a chance on us for us to get to that next size. Everyone can come out of the gates and get through turns 1 and 2. And then coming into turn 3, you start losing a lot of the pack and they start falling off. It's more important now than ever as far as in-store experience, retail theater. Retail's not going away. The retailers and the brick and mortar that's here to stay really have to step up their game. Part of it's e-commerce and the larger space and the growth of that segment of how consumers are shopping. And a lot of it just has to do with younger demographics and generations and their shopping habits. They want engagement. They want it to be always changing so they don't see the same thing time in and time out. And so it's important as a retailer and it's important as a rising brand to be able to partner and understand that you have a more in-depth playbook to be able to partner on those ideas and execution rather than you're just kind of a one-trick pony. As the retail experience changes, the retailers that are learning to be much more nimble is how they partner with the rising brand. Before, it was a little more one-dimensional in the relationship, the buying process, and said, yes, I like your product. We'll bring it in, we'll put it in all of our stores. Now it's down to this makes sense for this region or this banner. We want to play in multiple spaces within our store. What does your support look like to do that? How do we create the in-store experience? Whereas before it was, all right, we can get it on the shelf and let's talk about ad space and maybe some other possible marketing material down the road.
How should a rising brand approach selling into a buyer?
Starts with knowing your category, knowing your product, of course, and really understanding the space you're playing in, and then what retailer really plays within those space. Part of that is, understanding what that retailer is all about. No one wants to be everything to everybody. It's why they have all different banners now and more regionality in their assortment mix and better understanding of the local customer. The brand has to be able to recognize that and do their homework and figure out, hey, look, we've looked at this. This is what our brand's about. Here's our vision as how we see it in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's going to be important to the retailer too, because they're going to see if there's alignment as far as growth together, or is this an in and out, or yes, I don't think this makes sense at all.
When a rising brand representative walks into a buyer's meeting, what might they be asked to provide? What is the buyer noticing?
Number one, most say less is more. I would always be prepared on the other side of that coin and having more, because you don't know unless you truly already have a previous relationship with this buyer what they're looking for exactly. I'd rather have my toolbox of my brand as a sample. I'd like to have the data that shows the validation of the successes I've had in other marketplaces or other chains and retailers. I'd like them to show the data around the space in general and the trend to show that I'm really engaged in not just my product, but understanding this whole category within snack or juice, whatever it might be. The more you can kind of humbly show all the components of the data, whether that's third party, formalized from an IRI, Nielsen, another retailer's data, your own data that you can be able to validate, the actual product, all your pricing, the supply chain. Maybe 2 of those components come up in a meeting, but maybe 5 or 7 of those components come up. So I think it's always important that you're prepared. If you have successes, and again, validation that it's worked in a very like location in another retailer, the retailer would love to hear about that, because it takes a lot of time to Often, if they need to insert the product to be able to have to take something out, if it creates a category reset because there's multiple new products going in and multiple products coming out from lack of performance. Probably the biggest mistake that I see is that they are not prepared. It's kind of a one size fits all, and maybe that worked for the last stop that they made, and then they come in and maybe I'm more of a specialty retailer and they came from a very large conventional retailer, and our needs are very different. One's not right or wrong or more important than the other, but they're just very different. So as a buyer and a retailer, you want them to fully understand your business first and understanding who their competitors are, because a retailer wants to know, well, okay, this is a very trendy category. We've seen a lot of these submissions and everyone wants to get in. So why are we here and why are we going to bring this one in? And they say, well, I'm offering you a really good price, or I'm offering this support for an ad. Well, everyone does that. And everyone's going to claim to do that. So it's important that they've done their homework. And the more that they talk as a subject matter expert, say, this is what I saw in your store, here are my recommendations. Most buyers and retailers want to hear that feedback. It helps them perform their job better. So that's really another key piece.
Researching the stores and retail environment for my kind of product sounds smart, but how should Rising Brands perform that assessment?
You could walk into a retailer that you want to call on and get a pretty good idea of, one, how they run their stores, the feel, the look, the type of customer that might be in there during, kind of that dinner time or in the morning. You can tell a lot just by walking the aisles, how their inventory, how their merchandising looks across different departments that might be cross-merchandising opportunities, the amount of space they're kind of allocating to maybe the space that you're about to be, going into pitch. What is that retailer typically using right now for that space? And how much space are they really dedicating to that? Part of that is just sheer demand and data from the retailer. But part of it also is, and if it's more on the specialty side as a retailer, the retailer will kind of take a future stand on this is where the category is going, so we don't touch it every 2 months to keep up with more rising brands coming in to help fill the need of what our customers want within that space or aisle, that they'll say up front, we know this is going to continue to grow and we're going to project it this way, so it's important that we allow that space. So for a brand looking at what they need to do to support and offer and propose to the retailer, it's important that they're looking at the white space around just the inline shelves. How much cross-merchandising is going on? Are there a bunch of displays throughout by the registers? Are there cross-merchandising displays? What other opportunities do I have? Because in the end, if you can frame those opportunities into multiple opportunities for the retailer, and they're framed in such a way, that retailer is going to be much more engaging on hearing why they should bring this product in versus, you know what, I have this, it would fit really good on aisle 4 on your shelf.
After seeing what's on the shelves, it seems like there really are no completely original product ideas.
If you feel you're a Me Too product and understanding how you would stand out to the buyer, I think it's important that you come prepared to be able to talk about it not being necessarily a Me Too product and having the additional support that maybe allows you to stand out from the other Me Too's. If I'm in a rising brand, instead of just offering the same, again, price and marketing support structure, you want to be able to maybe say, listen, here are some of the things we're going to do in conjunction with a different department. And we did this in another retailer and it proved to be very successful in order to create more exposure and engagement with the consumer in your stores. So it really shows that you've thought out how you're going to break off of just being in line on the shelf and given that opportunity instead of just a Me Too product. And usually as a retailer, depending on where they're playing and what they want to achieve, they're going to be open ears. They want to hear if there's a win somewhere else. One, they're going to want to know, why aren't we already doing this? Or it doesn't make sense, and that conversation will be had. But if the buyer's already engaged, more than likely it does make sense. There's a need within the category, and although you're a Me Too product, there's going to be a reason on why that can still be added.
How can a brand make a difference with packaging?
The packaging has to be able to engage the customer just like the theater and in-store experience that the retailer wants to create. It's very easy to look at one product when you're evaluating a brand or one SKU of that brand. More often than not, it looks really sharp by itself sitting on a white table. And then when you go to put that product on the shelf, it can also disappear very quickly because now there's 100 like bottles or 100 like boxes. It's important that that packaging, The messaging on the packaging, it's clear, concise, innovative, fresh, and because you want it to stand out, number one, you want to show that the customer recognizes that you have rising brands and innovation and fresh products. If they're not standing out, you're not going to get credit from the customer. The customer's not going to purchase them, and that product's going to fall off out of the assortment. When you look at the package and it's on the shelf, it should scream the story without even knowing the story. That's why it's very important when a buyer does want to give feedback. More than likely, you're representing this one brand, and you might be an expert on your own brand, of course, and as you should, and you're going to say, well, why is that retailer telling me what I need to do about my own brand, my own company that you might be fully involved in still? What does he or she know? That retailer has also probably been through 100 like meetings, or can speak to what is working in their stores and different geographical areas or different banners. They're giving you their data and their validation. They're not doing it because they have extra time in the day to pick apart all your hard work over the years as a brand. They want to be able to find the right solution so they can maximize sales and success with, if we tweak this package and we add a white stripe all the way around, it's going to really make it stand out because I know everything else around is complete opposite in contrast, or is dark bottle or dark box. I think it's very important that you're open to feedback. If the retailer is offering advice on your package, he or she's probably very interested in doing business with you too. They're not telling you to go change your package and good luck everywhere else. More than likely, they want to figure out a solution together. And so I think understanding and hearing that without them saying, I'm interested in your product, and I think the more you embrace that and show the willingness, depending on what's involved to do that, is going to be a very key factor in your successful partnership moving forward.
How do buyers decide what they're looking for?
A lot of it is they're going to look to some of their associates that are on Instagram all the time, or something they see on the food channel that's a brand new product, or looking at other grocers or specialty regional chains and see what they're doing, because it might be a product that's only in the Northwest and I'm in the Southeast, but I can still get that product. It's just because it would be new and innovative for me, and they're very saturated on the West Coast. And there's a lot of regionality where there's a lot of great products. They just have not scaled nationally, and obviously that would be the clear next step for a rising brand. Retailers overall use very historical third-party data. It could be IRI, it could be Nielsen, it could be their industry publications as far as within the space that they're responsible for within the buyers. But now I think it's evolving to, there's so many other channels. There's social media that a lot of brands, especially rising brands, are turning to. It could be an organic Instagram marketing program. It could be Facebook. And they're gaining traction that way because it's much more affordable than some of the kind of historical marketing vehicles that were used by brands even 5-10 years ago. So when you put all those pieces together, it really opens up, how they're finding the right product.
How soon will I know if there's serious buyer interest in my product?
It's a faster process than it's been, but it's not an overnight process. You might get a yes in that meeting. You might get we're going to be back to you in 30 days when we have all the final decisions as our published timeline goes. And you might we should get back to you by the end of the week, and you don't hear anything. And understand that it's a hard process. And there's a lot of hands, especially as you're dealing with larger retailers that play in many different geographic regions, have different banners. You might get the yes right away. And then you go, okay, well, that means we can get product in by Friday. And that's probably not going to happen if it's Wednesday. And more than likely, I could say 99% sure it's not going to happen the following week either. But it's okay, again, to have that conversation, understand, I know you're busy. How do I better understand what the timeline is and what you need from me to ensure that I'm keeping the process moving on my end? A lot of times that's going to be more welcome than shut down because, again, a lot of retailers, especially from kind of that store support and corporate environment now, they're moving to leaner organizations.
Walk us through a traditional retail organization. Who should an emerging brand expect to meet?
As a rising brand, you're going to deal with a lot of different aspects of the organization. The gatekeeper will always be the buyer that's responsible kind of for that category and will probably end up being their main contact. The buyer often has a small support team to help with a lot of the pieces and administrative parts that go with keeping up with the brand after the buyer, and the buyer takes your product in. There could be a marketing person that wants to talk to you about, this is a new campaign we're doing, and the buyer might be able to originally say, here's an idea we have, but then they're going to probably hand you off to maybe a marketing colleague because they want to talk about, any digital program or someone from the digital team and about this is what we're doing on our Facebook page and how do we get this support. It has a lot to do with that support and experience that might happen in store. A lot of it's moving to digital now because of the amount of reaches and value from the digital standpoint. And then of course, depending on how you do as far as your distribution and your supply chain, if accounting ends up calling you from an invoice or an A&R standpoint, now you're dealing with someone in accounting. If you're selling into a distribution center, well, now you might have another side of supply chain. Again, all working with the buyer, still going to be your contact. And it's just important that you're as responsive to those people within the organization as you are the buyer. And often I've seen both because they said, well, I'm just worried about what the buyer thinks. And as the main point of contact for the retailer, and then they end up kind of upsetting the apple cart throughout the organization internally on lack of response, delayed response, inaccurate information, and that comes back to the buyer. And the buyer will say, you know what, it's not worth the headache. Now, kind of the pie's on my face. I really don't want to deal with this. When there was a lot of similar products, maybe I'll just move to that because I know I can count on this other supplier, this other brand. Vice versa, they can come right back around and say, wow, this brand is amazing. They're so responsive, they're accurate, they're on the ball. Hopefully we do more business with them. And then they begin to lean more on as a brand and a partner and then looking to do more together.
How does a retailer typically evaluate performance?
First and foremost, if you want to understand what your dashboard needs to be with a retailer to understand the health of your brand, you really need to understand how the retailer measures and is measured internally within the organization. It's to understand, number one, what is that retailer and buyer looking at? You don't want to wait for the buyer and retailer to come back and say, hey, we have 350 days of inventory on hand. What do you want to do about it? Because that's really the last call or email you want to get. You want to be able to go back to the retailer right away and look at it and say, hey, it seems that we're not moving all the product initially and we're having a hard time getting placements or shelf distribution for the new reset and the current space and planograms. Is it about the price point that the retailer's setting it at? Number two, are they set up where they're competitive on where that product really belongs from a suggested retail price? If you have all those kind of pieces of alignment, you can then look at, is it about placement in the store? And every store, is it on the bottom shelf? Is that where it belongs? Or is it in a strike zone shelf as the customers are going through? And is that where it belongs? Understanding as a brand how they go about those decision-making processes along with those kind of key, kind of measuring components. And if you understand that and you're proactively working in that, there shouldn't be any surprises in the end.
Can you give an example from when you were a buyer and a brand did it right?
When you look at products and you want to determine this is a winner or I'm going to play it safe and I'm going to start with this amount in a few stores instead of rolling it out to all stores, obviously you're hedging the risk of the company you work for, but part of it is too, you're kind of hedging your own ego. You're always going to have winners and you're going to have just complete dogs and failures. I mean, that's just what happens. If you're not failing at all, it means you're probably not pushing the envelope enough. When I think of something like that and one of my successes, it was a very, very small regional player, one of the first flavored waters out there. And one of the really key aspects of it is that they truly were a rising brand. They had unbelievable product, unbelievable price, unbelievable package. So you had the three P's were there. What they didn't know and didn't have necessarily is, could they keep up? It was a very much more laid back mentality, but I love their story. And it was our chance to kind of launch the product to the market regionally. And so we're able to do that. I wish I had gone bigger up front. And that's probably the kind of the failure part of it. But the best part is, the times when something works so well and you run out, it's a good problem to have. And those problems are far and few compared to, wow, we still have 350 days of inventory on hand. Now we really have to focus on that and focusing on, I can't believe how fast that flew off the shelf, because really as a buyer and as a retailer, you're playing in between those two really opposite ends of the spectrum. So you're again playing in that middle lane overall, but you also have to include those other ends of the spectrum to ensure that you're kind of maximizing the opportunities for the company you represent.